And Representative Harden, if you will. So every year our chair gets assigned an intern, our committee, and Connor doesn't want me to do this, but she was absent yesterday for a good reason, and her brother has signed for Appalachian State for football. So just want to say congratulations. So we enjoy it too when something good happens. So I will now call on my Resource Management Subcommittee Chair for his report. What number are you? 24. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. On February 6th, the Resource Management Committee took up House Bill 665. After reviewing the legislation as well as 2 letters of support from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Natural Resources, we as a subcommittee recommended a do pass for House Bill 665.
Thank you for your report, and this issue is now before us, and we have the bill's author, Representative Lumsden, here, and you have the mic.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 665. I'm working from LC 41-1254. This was a bill that was brought to me by the GBI. This is a bill that deals with the reporting requirements for abandoned vessels. Whenever a vessel is abandoned, whether on public or private property, there's certain information that has to be reported. That information has to be reported both to the GBI and to the Department of Natural Resources. The bill before you simply removes the GBI from as an entity that is reported to. This particular process dates back many decades, predates the DNR's law enforcement capabilities as we have them today, even predates GCIC. So this is just an unnecessary redundancy. In the letters that you have in your file, you will see that both the DNR and the GBI are both in agreement with this. So this just removes a reporting requirement and removes the GBI as an entity that has to be reported to and turns it entirely over to the DNR.
Thank you. This is the proper time for questions, if anyone has any questions or comments on this. At this point, yes.
I'm sorry. What was the reason that the GBI would have been notified originally? It would have been
As I said, it predated the DNR's law enforcement capabilities. When you have a vessel abandoned like that, questions arise. Was it a stolen vessel? Was it involved in some way in criminal activity? As I said, it predates, this goes back decades, so it predates the abilities that the DNR possesses today.
Thank you. At the proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right. I see no further questions. You're recognized for your motion.
I'd make a motion to pass.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 665? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? You have your bill. You know the process. Go to rules. We'll sign the report here and then petition to get on their calendar. Thank you very much. I'm sure it was for your good support back behind you that we all complied.
Thank you.
Thank you. When we can do during the session, we like to feature our different agencies that have legislation before our committee. And we have a former legislator who now is the director of the Forestry Commission, Chuck Williams. And so if you will come forward, and we'd love to get an update from you. And I thought yesterday was really nice. It was an honor for us to recognize all the our rangers and their achievements in our state.
Madam Chair,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Is this the hot mic?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I had that on the top of my top of my notes today to thank you for leading the effort there for those invite resolutions. That really means a lot to our men and women around the state, and that the folks that you see here are not the winners of a popularity contest. Actually, we have a very structured, objective process that really looks at their goals and objectives for the year and their performance, and so those are the sort of the stars of the stars, if you will, that are up here. And Madam Chair, I really didn't realize, for a number of years when I was serving here with you in the legislature and on your committee, how much that meant to our people around the state until I got out and started traveling and started seeing those framed pictures and whatnot prominently displayed in those units around the state, and would hear folks talk about, yeah, I met you 3 years ago when we came up to the Capitol for that recognition. So, Madam Chair, thank you again for that. Very, very much appreciated. Joanna Warren, who works with us in our communications area and helps me out here during the session, is handing out some information on our services and whatnot. Hopefully all of you found on your chamber desk yesterday a two-pager that's sort of a summary of a recent Georgia Tech economic impact update. And if you would like the full version of that, the full book, we will certainly get that to you. Madam Chair, I know you've got rules today, so I will try to get you out of here on time. I know if I don't do that you will cut me off and still get to rules on time. So I want to take just a few minutes.
Actually, the House cuts us off because we only had this room for an hour.
Okay.
But yes, I have a heavy prompt
keeps you from
to be
being
out
the
of
bad
here.
guy, right? I want to just take a moment and recap a few statistics that we typically do every year. I know last year when I was sitting where you are, former Director Robert Fair shared these numbers with us, and I don't know that everybody's committing them to memory, but just sort of a little report card that we do internally to keep up with some of our key programs in the area of forest protection, which is primarily wildfire prevention around the state. That is a core mission of the Georgia Forestry Commission. We've got about 550 employees statewide, and over 300 of those are in the protection division, so that gives you an idea of sort of the priority that we put on protection. We plowed and harrowed almost 24,000 miles of fire breaks in the state. Last year, we responded to 6,129 wildfires that burned 71,000 acres. We issued over 777,000 burning permits for a little over 1 million acres. And we gave 288 Smoky Bear programs around the state to educate our young people, primarily our young people there on the difference between good fire, which we consider to be prescribed fire, which has a key role in forest management, and bad fire, which is wildfire. On the management side, we do have a staff of management foresters in the state that provide assistance to landowners. We do that, though, with a keen eye towards the fact that in Georgia, as in most, particularly southeastern states, there are consulting foresters that have hung out their shingle and make a living providing those services. So we try to provide the services that we do respectfully of what they're doing to make a living. I personally view our management role as maybe a little more focused towards smaller landowners, beginning landowners that maybe either don't have the scale of timberland holdings or the expertise to engage a consulting forester, and that we will work with them and help them understand what they have and what their opportunities and challenges are, and then if they at some point graduate to the private sector by engaging a consulting forester, that is well and good. We develop a lot of forestry management plans, in particular some of the USDA cost share programs that have forestry components for our farmers around the state do require forestry management plans, and we play a key role there in developing those. Last year we helped develop or developed over 2,200 forestry management plans covering 102,000 acres. Urban and community forestry, that is a key area for us. We're sort of segueing into the term community forestry more than urban, because it is not just urban, but we recognize that You know, Georgia's got 10 million citizens now, you know, certainly less than 500,000 on timberland. So if we're going to retain the support of Georgia's citizens for the forestry community, we've got to be reaching out to folks other than just the timberland owners, and that is partially where our urban and community forestry work comes in. We manage the Tree City program. We brought in 13 new tree cities last year. We've got around 150 in the state now, which we're real proud of. We also work with tree campuses, with college campuses that would like to get certified as being tree friendly, and we've got a number of those around the state also. We have programs working with all school age groups, elementary on up, and that is something that our folks really enjoy doing, and is almost like a treat for them to be able to get off the bulldozer, if you will, or out of the office and go visit those schools. So we're thankful for that opportunity. Reforestation, we do have tree nurseries around the state that provide seedlings for landowners that are wanting to plant or replant. And Madam Chair, that's another area where we recognize that the private sector has a vibrant business there, so we try to provide a service possibly to landowners that for whatever reason would not avail themselves of the private sector there. We sold over 12 million seedlings last year. We will sell over 2,200 pounds this year of pine seeds, the seeds that come out of pine cones, to private nurseries. We work with the Southeastern Research Unit that is headquartered at NC State. So we're growing a good quality seedling. There are probably higher performance seedlings out there. As we've said, it's sort of like the difference between a Chevrolet and a Ferrari. Either one will get you there. The Ferrari probably a little bit quicker. We've got a real good seedling. There are probably seedlings that will get you there quicker if super fast growth is what you're looking for. So that, Madam Chair, is just sort of a recap of what we're doing on the numbers side. I want to speak for just a moment about partnerships, because I didn't realize until I went to work for the Forestry Commission how dependent we are as an agency on partnerships. The General Assembly and the Governor provide us with a little over $50 million in direct funding every year, and we're very appreciative of that. Some of you have heard me say that sort of the mantra that I brought to the commission, and I've asked our folks to hopefully embrace, if not at least accept, is the fact that every week when we open the doors of the Forestry Commission, the taxpayers of Georgia, through you, basically write us a check for $1 million. And I've asked my folks to think about every week, what are we going to do this week to earn that $1 million? And then when the week is wrapping up, to look back and say, what did we do this week to earn that $1 million? And that's sort of the mindset that I bring from a budget and an appropriations standpoint. No surprise, we interact closely with a number of state agencies, in particular DNR obviously would be one of those. Also, the EPD division of DNR, through our permitting process, we basically manage the smoke management process in the state of Georgia. And DNR has delegated that to us, and we've got a good partnership working there. We interact a lot with federal agencies. We typically will bring in $8 to $10 million a year in federal dollars. Those are important. Most of those dollars are grant dollars that are allocated to certain programs such as stewardship or that type thing. Those dollars are important to us, but I would remind myself and ask you to keep in mind that the state dollars we receive are the core dollars that really support our core mission, if you will. I know sometimes it's easy to say, well, if they've got all this federal money coming in, we can take some state dollars and reallocate those elsewhere. The federal dollars are sort of the icing on the cake for us to allow us to do things that probably we wouldn't be able to do just based on our core funding. But that key protection and management work we do does rely on the state funding. We work with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, on a regular basis. We're finding ourselves now working with the military a lot. I alluded to this yesterday during the invite resolution. Since we were following Fort Benning, Georgia has a very vibrant military-based presence, but as Georgia's population grows, our military folks tell us that creates more and more challenges for them, particularly installations like Fort Benning and Fort Stewart and the Townsend bombing range there on the Altamaha River where military training starts butting up against human population growth and residential density and whatnot. We've also got the issues of endangered species, working hard around the state to try to keep the gopher tortoise off of the endangered species list. Not that we don't respect gopher tortoises, we love gopher tortoises, but that will, if that species gets listed, that will be a whole new game for forestry, for military training, for agriculture, for almost every land use you can think of. So we, in partnership with other state agencies, for example, DNR, the Nature Conservancy as an NGO, are working now with Fort Benning on what we refer to as ACUBs, Army Compatible Use Buffers, and that is trying to basically, primarily through conservation easement, somewhat through fee ownership, control development, if you will, around the periphery of military bases, so that they can continue to train. It also has a role there with endangered species. If the Army can tell the Department of Interior that we're creating and maintaining gopher tortoise habitat outside of our boundaries, that resonates with them to continue to be able to train within their boundaries. So that is something that we will continue to do and we'll look forward to doing. Just a few things, Madam Chair, that sort of hit my radar when I came on board back in September, just to give you an idea of sort of how we're spending our time. One of the first things I heard about when I joined the commission was that we had a number of men and women around the state that had worked on federal incidents, oftentimes fighting fire out west. We actually encourage our folks, because of the training component and whatnot, to seize those opportunities to go out west and fight wildfire. We also have in-state situations, particularly like when fire comes off of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where federal dollars are used to fight that fire. When I walked in the door, I realized that we had over $1 million that was owed to our men and women, our rangers, the boots on the ground folks, where they had fought fire, were owed federal dollars, and we were still waiting to get them their money. And that didn't sit well with me, so started looking for ways to kick that log jam out of the creek, and in particular had some conversations with Chairman England about that. He had some conversations with OPB, and within a few weeks of starting those conversations, we were able to go ahead and get our folks paid dollars that they were owed. And we knew the federal dollars were coming. Our posture had just been wait on the federal money to get here, and then we'll pay our people. And I was like, these folks have worked hard to earn this. Let's get them paid now, and we'll balance the books appropriately when those federal dollars come in. So we were able to do that. We're without getting too far in the weeds, we're looking at things like our work capacity test. Some of us are office jockeys in the commission, but we've got folks that are working hard in the field. A lot of firefighting in the South is bulldozer, but from time to time we have to put hand crews together, whether it's in the mountains or whether we're sending folks out west. We've got a work capacity test now that is pretty strenuous, and to tell you how strenuous, 2 miles in 30 minutes. And you may say, well, what's the big deal there, walking 2 miles in 30 minutes? Well, it means you've also strapped on a vest that's got 25 pounds of steel weights in it. And that's the basic test for anyone that's in the field. If anyone wants to go out west and fight those wildfires, it's 45 pounds of weight, 3 miles in 45 minutes. I'm all for physical fitness and a healthy workforce, and realize that, if we've got a 400-pound operator running a bulldozer and he's on the backside of a wildfire and something happens, he may have trouble saving his life or the life of his coworker, but we're not sure exactly where the line is with an aging workforce, if you will. So that's one of the things we're going to look at. Mentioned an equipment replacement protocol. That's something that Chairman England and I had talked about during my time in the legislature, making sure with a fleet of over 300 bulldozers in the state and transports to move them, that we're maintaining a fleet of safe equipment for our men and women to operate oftentimes in wildfire scenarios, but making sure that we're getting all the use we can out of that from the taxpayer standpoint. So we're revisiting equipment replacement protocol. We're revisiting how we maintain equipment. Madam Chair, one of the things we're running into is that our workforce, the young people that join us as rangers, from what the veterans of the Forestry Commission tell me, are very different than what they were 20 or 30 years ago. 20 or 30 years ago, I think most of our incoming rangers were probably farm boys whose dad had said, son, get out and get a public job and get off the farm. So they came in with a deep understanding of equipment operation and natural resources and whatnot. They required a little bit of training on our equipment, and they were ready to go. What we're seeing now is really a different type of new employee. As somebody in the commission told me, said they're much more familiar with joysticks than they are grease guns. And if you look at our new dozers, that's really the way the equipment is evolving. When you climb up on a new Caterpillar dozer now that's being built over in my hometown near Athens, it's coming into us, it's got an environmental cab on it, which is needed. That's something that we've been working is to, over time, convert our fleet to environmental cabs. But basically, it's got joysticks on either side, and that really it's drive-by-wire, if you will, and that's sort of the world we live in. So those young folks that are used to that do well with that, but where they struggle is really knowing what a grease gun is and how to maintain that equipment. So we're having to tweak our training, if you will, and make sure that our folks understand what's going on there. So that's just some of the things that we're doing. We're revisiting uniforms. When I came on board, I heard from a lot of our people that were not happy with some of the nuances of our uniforms, and I was challenged a little bit on the House floor yesterday about why I was the only GFC employee there that did not have the GFC green and tan uniform on, and my response was, I don't think I've earned the right to wear that uniform. Those men and women who have gone through all of our firefighter training and whatnot, they've earned that right, and I'm not there yet. So I don't want. I'm going to take the test. Yes, ma'am. You are correct. But it sounds sort of trite, I know, but we think we want to wear uniforms. We think there's certainly a reason for us to wear uniforms. Most of our people, most of the time. But when our short sleeve summer uniform shirt looks more like a World War II Army tent as far as the thickness of the material, and nobody wants to wear it, it's like we need to revisit this. So, yeah, we're sort of nitpicking a little bit there, but it's a morale issue and those kind of things. I think we'll have a more productive workforce if we respond to those kind of issues that our people want us to take a look at. Madam Chair, I'll sort of wrap up with this and then take any questions. When I came on board and went through a competitive hiring process, and in the end analysis, our 7-member board and Governor Deal elected to offer me the job. With me not being a career GFC employee, there was recognition there that I lacked a lot of institutional knowledge as far as day-to-day operations. And the commitment that was made at that time from our board and the governor's office was if I went to work for the commission, that we would hire a deputy director. And that's a position that we formerly had, went away during the Great Recession. We had been without a deputy director for over a decade. And that was the agreement that was made. We hired that deputy director, an internal hire, Gary White, who lives up in the Franklin County area of Northeast Georgia, was our chief of forest management, and Gary is our new deputy director. Would have been here today, but needed to be elsewhere in a pretty significant way. And so our structure going ahead will be that Gary is in charge of basically day-to-day operations. His working title, I guess, will be Chief Operating Officer. He is a veteran of the commission. He has some private sector experience also, so we'll be leaning on him to run day-to-day operations. It doesn't mean that I will not have my finger on the pulse of everything we're doing. His challenge will probably be keeping me from micromanaging and preventing him from doing his job. But my focus will be a little more external than probably previous directors have been, and that's everything obviously from interacting with other state agencies, with the legislature, with NGOs, with our federal partners there, and just making sure that, that we're everywhere we need to be there. In conjunction with that, we are in the process of revisiting our organizational structure. We like most, or at least a lot of state agencies, we're pretty siloed right now, and we've got a forest protection silo, and we've got a forest management silo, and then we've got a field operations silo, which, interestingly enough, all the people in the field report to field operations, but the work they do is to accomplish the goals and objectives primarily of either forest protection or forest management. So the people that are actually getting those jobs done don't report to those. So we're taking a hard look, if you will, at organizational structure and just about what makes sense with a keen eye really on customer service, because that's sort of what I've asked our folks again, in addition to the $1 million a week, is to remind ourselves that we're a customer service agency. Our customers, our core customers, are obviously the forest landowners of Georgia, but really they're the 10 million Georgians that reside in this state. And I've asked my people to just keep that in mind every day. And also trying to remind our headquarters staff, probably like a lot of organizations, it's easy for, at some point, your field staff to sort of draw the conclusion that they work for headquarters. And what I've suggested to my people is that when I've been in my office in Macon, where our headquarters is, and it's certainly open to the public, but I don't know that I've seen a customer of the Georgia Forestry Commission walk through the front door of our building in the nearly 6 months that I've been on board now. But whenever I'm out in the field, there are customers walking in the door regularly of our field offices and calling in. So I view senior management's role is to support the folks in the field, not vice versa, and that's the direction we'll be headed in as well. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand down and stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Now, I'll start with a question and give y'all a chance to figure if you have any questions. One of my concerns has always been that as our state becomes more urban population and the next census is coming up, and we will have more and more urban type legislators. And I think it's very important what y'all do and what the forestry does, our whole state. We are #1 in the United States, correct? In forestry.
Yes, ma'am. By most any metric you want to look at, we're the #1 forestry state in the nation.
And to those of you who have to go look to find a tree, I can tell you that you need that tree wherever we can put a tree. And that's always been the mission of the Forestry Association and Commission of Georgia. And for all of us, we appreciate what y'all do. And I will also emphasize to you that in the fire seasons, it's a very dangerous time for y'all. And so now we can talk about it in the abstract, but just listen out this summer and fall, and you'll know what a lot of folks are out there doing. So.
Yes, ma'am. You're exactly correct. And to your point about the importance of forestry, certainly the commercial forestry component we have in the state, commercial timberland, whether it's privately owned, corporately owned, or whatnot, sawmills, wood processors are keenly important. But as we said, from a standpoint of population, that's a small segment of our population. And so I think one of our challenges and opportunities is to continually educate Georgians that it's not just commercial forestry, it's community forestry, and even in commercial forestry, it's those benefits that forestry provides as far as clean air and clean water, scenic vistas, wildlife habitat that really is being provided by forest land owners at no charge to the citizens of the state. I think we've got to continue to make sure that people are aware of that.
Thank you. So I have some questions. State your name number 23.
Hi, Chuck. This is Representative Sherry Gilligan. Nice to see you again. And there were a couple of questions I have, if that's okay, Madam Chairman.
Check our time. I think we're good.
All right. So earlier this session, we heard from the Department of Natural Resources that they had offered services to help in the cleanup after Irma. And I was curious, did your department as well, your commission, do that as well?
Yeah, thank you. I should have touched that. I was really impressed with the video presentation that Commissioner Williams and his folks presented to you. We may get there, we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
But I was looking as his video was running for those Forestry Commission folks in the background, and I think their camera person did a good job of capturing their people. We're very much involved really in every phase of disaster preparedness and response in the state of Georgia. We do interact with DNR a lot from that standpoint if it's storms or whatnot, but I think I'd been on the job a week and got a call from the governor's office when Tropical Storm Irma was coming. They said, be at the State Operations Center Sunday at 6 o'clock for a press conference. Be prepared to stand behind the governor and be in uniform. So I was busy getting some of Robert Ferris's hand-me-down uniform pants and safety pinning the legs up and whatnot. And I think that's the only time I've had a uniform on, but I spent a couple of days at the Emergency Operations Center observing and watching what our folks were doing, because we have a table there. A lot of what we do is logistics, again, with 300 and something bulldozers and the heavy equipment to move them. In a situation like that, whether it's bottled water or big generators that need to be moved, we've got the equipment and the people that know how to do that. So we play a key role there logistically in those kind of situations. We have chainsaw strike teams that work right along with DNR on reentry. We have a very, very small law enforcement contingent, so we provide support there when we can, but we're very much a player with the state, working with GEMA. And Madam Chair, if I could, one thing there, we were talking about cooperation with state agencies. Literally, it came out of a conversation there at the State Operations Center one evening. I was talking with Homer Bryson, the GEMA director, and with Greg Dozier, the Department of Corrections Commissioner, just having a casual conversation. And they were lamenting the fact that in situations like a natural disaster like that, they're waiting on the feds to mobilize and to get product moving. And you know, Commissioner Bryson just made the comment. He said, I'd sure like to have some state resources staged around the state, whether it's cots or bottled water or whatever. And he said, we just got to find a place to put it. And I told him, I said, we may have some space on our campus in Macon, because we're on like a 50-acre campus there, a former military training base. Long story short, they came down and looked at it. We had a building that was being somewhat underutilized, if you will, and we have since signed an MOU with GEMA for them to stage materials there. We like it as well, because otherwise it means that probably we can load up materials in our own backyard and move them, rather than having to drive our equipment to Atlanta, to Dobbins or somewhere. And our staff would much rather work out of Macon than they would Marietta. So that's an example of how we interact. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And may I follow?
Let me get the other two, then we'll come back to you. So number 23. 25.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say I think the Commission Board and the Governor made a mighty good choice in getting you in that position. I just really appreciate you being there. With that said, I want to urge you, you talked about partnerships, and I got two that I would really, and I know you're familiar with one of them, and Department of Economic Development. We're growing more trees and more wood in this state than we ever have, but I think we're really lacking on some mills and plants, and I know it's a big push, but you know, economic development is pushing these movie studios and .com companies coming to Metro Atlanta, and we got a great natural resource in our forest that's really, I believe, got a little oversupply right now, and I know our export markets are doing. So I hope you'll urge in partnership with economic development on letting them know the importance of our forest land and the products that we use out of those. So that one, and the other one, have you partnered, anybody in your department, with GDOT? In my district, they are cutting wood on the right-of-ways from fence to fence, and have really got an issue. And they are in dire need of a professional forest person to advise them on how to cut these right-of-ways. So if you would offer y'all's expertise to GDOT, I think they could really use it. So thank you, Mr. Director.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, you actually showed up for work today,
Yeah,
didn't you?
I did, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to respond to both of those.
Yes,
From the economic development standpoint, I should have mentioned that. That, again, is going to be one of my focus areas. You're certainly correct. Our markets in Georgia are not where they need to be, particularly in Middle Georgia and North Georgia. Our timber markets are at the point where they're starting to discourage landowners from managing their forests properly, and that's a real concern to us. So I've actually already had one sit-down meeting with Economic Development Commissioner Pat Wilson and his senior team. And I know this body has been given a lot of time and effort to rural economic development, and I'm one of those that believes that part of our answer as far as rural economic development in Georgia lies in forestry and agriculture. We can't put a Kia plant in every county of those 159, and further processing of forestry and ag products is going to be, I think, part of the answer there, and we hope to be part of that discussion, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to GDOT, we actually are working with GDOT. We have the responsibility, if you will, to help all state agencies manage any timberlands. GDOT did come to us and ask us to help them basically market and get harvested the wood where they're clearing off interstates. I'm told that is a safety issue primarily for them, and beyond that, my knowledge runs out pretty quick. That discussion would need to be with the GDOT management. We're assisting them as they have asked us to accomplish their objectives.
Thank you. Next is number 24. Let's see. Is it?
Madam Chair, thank you.
That was an announcement.
Commissioner, thank you so much for what y'all do. A year and a half ago, I was able to hook up with DNR and visit some of the wildfire areas and watch your team in action. And I think just as a encouragement to the rest of the committee, and as you're a former member here, an idea, it was so eye-opening for me to be on the ground and watch you guys work, and see some of y'all's old equipment a couple of years ago. So if there is an opportunity for members of this committee or any members, if there's an area y'all are in, just not to add work, but it was extremely eye-opening, and it was a great opportunity for me to see y'all in action on the ground. And interesting that you mentioned the uniforms. I did think about that while I was there. I thought, man, these things look like they're from the 50s.
They are.
So anyhow, thank you so much for what y'all do. It was extremely eye-opening, and just amazed by everything y'all do, and to see. One question I do have is, what is your employees? How many folks do you have under you?
We have around 550 employees statewide, plus temporary part-times depending on fire season and whatnot. And as I mentioned, over 300 of those 550 are on the forest protection side.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Number 22.
Dan Gasaway, House District 28. I have a question first about smoke management. I've been doing a lot of burning past couple months and getting my permit every day, which I wish we could find a better way, but I guess that's how it is. But I had a day where I was couldn't get a permit because they said smoke was an issue out in where I live. And I'm just wondering who makes that call. Is that your people making the smoke call, or is that Atlanta Regional Commission related call?
Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, it's us that make the final call. Every day, we have an on-staff meteorologist, and every day he provides us, well before most of us are up for the day, a weather forecast. We take that, we blend it in with the federal weather forecast, if you will. We factor in what else is going on at the U.S. Forest Service. If we're aware that they're going to be doing large burns in any particular area, they're not required to permit through us. The feds can do their own thing. We try to stay in communication Again, for us, with prescribed fire or debris burning or whatever, smoke management has become the issue. We know we've had some situations where, where Atlanta's gotten smoked in, Hartsville's gotten smoked in. We're much more attuned to that. If you call in now to get a burn permit, you may realize that you're being asked a little more finite information about where you are. And what's happening behind the scenes is that that GFC employee you're talking with is basically plotting your location on a computer, and based on the wind expectations and whatnot, looking at sort of the cone of where your smoke is going to go. And if we see a school downwind or a nursing home or even a dense residential area or whatnot, that may mean no permit that day compared to if the wind were out of another direction. So we're fire advocates. We're advocating in Georgia for us to use prescribed fire more, but we're cognizant of the fact that in spite of the fact that the governor just this week signed a prescribed fire proclamation in Georgia, that prescribed fire still is a privilege and not a right in the state of Georgia. And I think sometimes we maybe err on the side of caution, which frustrates landowners. I have been frustrated myself before when I have thought we had good burning conditions and I couldn't get a burn permit.
I'm not frustrated. I'm just curious.
Okay, I've been frustrated.
I have too, but
So you may join me there, but that's sort of the dynamics that are playing out is really sort of, how many have gotten in line in front of you? Depending on the fire danger that day.
he specifically mentioned smoke, and that's why I was just curious if that was a call coming out of Metro or if that's you making the call.
That's
It sounds
us
like
making
y'all
the final
making it.
decision
Okay.
based on all those parameters.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 17.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I miss you sitting behind me with all your go dog comments. And congratulations on your job. I think the governor did a good job appointing you.
Thanks,
And
sir.
I'm very satisfied with the services that I've gotten over the years from the Berrien County group. They're just fantastic, and thank you. Longleaf Pines, what kind of program we have? Because that goes right in with the gopher tortoise. What kind of program do you have as far as Longleaf Pines are concerned?
Yeah, there is a push from a lot of different parts of the forestry community on longleaf pine reestablishment. Most of the actual programs that you're probably referring to would be cost share programs and whatnot, or federal programs, sir. So those would primarily be through USDA. And we actually, again, we talked about that balance between public and private. We grow some longleaf seedlings in our nursery, but we do not grow containerized, and most of the folks that are planting longleaf won't containerize. We have, up to this point, said the private sector is meeting that. So certainly management assistance and evaluating sites, whether they're appropriate for longleaf, and sort of writing a prescription for site prep and whatnot, we can play that role. But as far as cost share, you'd primarily be dealing with your USDA Farm Service or NRCS agents.
Madam Chair, I spoke with GDOT, the commissioner and so forth, and our district board member, and they brought up pine beetles. Is pine beetles one of the reasons they're going down 95 and cutting all the trees down? And also 16, was that involved with pine beetles?
Representative, I'm not positive exactly what the balance was between safety and pine beetles. I know the last couple of years we've had significant pine beetle pressure in the state of Georgia, and it's been all over the state, somewhat unusual. So, and certainly dead pine trees create a hazard on road right-of-ways that live pine trees don't, as far as falling in the road. But again, I would really defer to GDOT, and we'll be glad to try to get any information from our folks about what directive they had from GDOT. Again, my sort of seat of the pants tells me it's probably a combination of all of the above. I think if you look at our interstates, they had clear right-of-ways when they were built, and Mother Nature, hates a vacuum, so she grows trees, and I think that's part of what we're seeing is that if you run off the interstate now and there's a pine tree waiting on you, that's a different scenario than if you just spin out on the grass. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Number 19.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on a personal note, I have a small tract of timber, and your people have always been very receptive to tell me what I need to do and how to do it with that timber. But I do have an economic question, but we're running short on time, and mine is mostly personal to my area, so I'll get with you afterwards. Thank you.
That's fine. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. And briefly, number 23.
Yes, thank you very much for all of the presentation you gave us. But I was deeply concerned about the people who were not paid by the FEMA, the federal. So I was curious, were they just not receiving any paycheck at all, or were these some like additional kinds of funds? Because I know that rangers make only between, well, not only, but somewhere between 27 to 48. And so those at the lower end, that could have been the difference in mortgage. And
Yeah, good point. Thanks for allowing me to clarify that. These folks were receiving their base pay. They were just not receiving basically the sort of the combat pay, if you will,
Right.
for the most part, that was due them. And you mentioned pay again. I know this is not an appropriations hearing, but you know, we're challenged there. Our turnover rates, attrition rates, particularly at the sort of the entry level, are much higher than they need to be. Our starting pay for a ranger is less than $30,000 a year, and with that, you know, they've got to be on call on weekends and whatnot. Our starting pay for foresters who have a 4-year degree from accredited institution is only around $40,000 a year. So we find ourselves there being the training ground a lot of times for folks that come out of college, take that job for a couple of years, and then we lose them to the private sector. So like all state agencies, you know, we're dealing with issues of compensation there, and I know we can't fix that here or fix it on an agency by agency basis, but turnover and attrition is a key concern. Probably the biggest concern I have in this role is the staffing challenges.
well, I want to thank you very much for all you do, and especially for looking out for the folks for their salary and compensation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our meeting for today. Be on the lookout for announcements for subcommittee meetings and our full committee meetings. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.